Okay, I'm very excited to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show Mark Devine, who started his career as a CPA, but then ultimately went on to fulfill his dream by becoming a Navy SEAL. Mark, real pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your invitation. Opportunity to be here.
So one of the things I have to ask before we kind of go into the details of what you're doing is whether you are a chess player. Do you play chess?
When I was younger, I used to play chess a lot, but I haven't done it probably in about 15 years. So, no.
All right, I'll tell you why I'm asking, because I know that you were number one in the Navy SEALs in your class, and
Right.
one of the studies that I had seen when I was working on my book about chess and investing, I wrote a book with the world chess champion, was we discovered that about a third of the Navy SEALs who succeed to be the recruits who succeed in the Navy SEAL program are chess players. So I thought there must be a big parallel between chess players and SEALs.
Yeah, just a strategic approach to life, I think probably it does make sense. And I did play a lot in my youth, and I went into the SEALs when I was 25, so maybe some of that chess training rubbed off.
All right, so you were a CPA on Wall Street, and then you became a Navy SEAL. What
Right, makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I tell a story a little bit in my book, The Way of the SEAL, that I really I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, near the Canadian border, actually, about 500 people in the town. And my family, the bumper community was Utica, New York. My family had a business there that had been around for over 100 years. It made machinery and equipment for industry. And so, unlike a lot of people, I was just kind of brought up expecting to go into business, to be in the family business. And then I went to a really nice, small, private liberal arts school, which was about an hour from my hometown, called Colgate University. And at Colgate, I studied economics. So it's kind of continued this path, and I went overseas on an economic study group to London, and I was an athlete. It all kind of pointing to me to go do something in business, and I didn't want to go right back to the family business, so I ended up with a job with Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. Where they came and recruited on campus. I got the offer along with some friends. And there were 8 of the big 8, they called it the big 8 accounting back then. Of course, a lot of them had merged, and there's not 8 anymore. I think there's like 4. But they all participated in this program where they hired from, elite liberal arts colleges and sent they hired non-accounting graduates. So I didn't have a lick of accounting in college, but I got hired by Coopers and Lybrand. And I had to apply for and get accepted to NYU Business School in the Master's of Science in Accounting program in order to get the job, and vice versa. And so there were a group of 70 of us who got hired from, like Harvard and Yale and Colgate and Williams and schools like that. And a few of my friends from Colgate were down there, and we all went down and we worked for the different firms, but we all went to school together in a cohort in this MS in Accounting program. It was a really interesting program. And their theory was the firm said, hey, we would like a more well-rounded partner. And we think that if we hire a liberal arts graduate and then teach them the accounting skills, we might get a more well-rounded partner. And some of my friends, in fact, one of my buddies who went through that is now co-CEO or actual CEO at Ernst & Young. And so it worked.
I guess they were right, yeah.
They were right in this case. In my case, I decided to leave I finished the MS in accounting, migrated my credits into the MBA program, finished up my MBA in finance. I ended up transitioning over to Arthur Andersen, which at the time seemed like a good idea because Arthur Andersen was the premier firm in the world, and this is in the mid-'80s, well before their ethical breach with Enron. And so then I finished up my CPA certificate with Andersen. Anyways, to make a long story short, during that time, I really had an epiphany, like an awakening, I guess you'd call it an early midlife crisis. And I realized that I really had no interest in being in business. I had no interest in the lifestyle, and I really was more meant to be, for a warrior calling. And so, this whole process really was kind of ignited by my martial arts training and my own development, my internal development through practices such as meditation and visualization that I'd learned through this really incredible martial arts master, led me to kind of crack myself wide open, which led me to, journeying into this completely radically different career as a warrior leader in the elite Navy SEAL teams. And I can tell you, as soon as I made that decision, it was like I had come home. Everything started to line up. Everything started to work much better. I was much happier. I was much more focused, much more disciplined. I ended up being #1 graduate in my SEAL training class. We had 185 start. We had 19 graduate, and I was #1 grad. So I just felt like, boom, I'm now on track, and here I go. And it's a lot of the stuff that I try to teach these days, came out of that early experience of trying to align with what I call my personal ethos, and that was it's kind of a ugly process that I went through, but I've refined it, over the years.
Well, it's an amazing story, certainly, that a lot of people can follow. We're talking to Mark Devine, who started as a CPA, but then became not only a Navy SEAL, but you were 9 years on active duty and 11 years as a reserve as well. So, first of all, Mark, thank you for your service. It's because of guys like you that keep the rest of us safe. So, we really.
I will say for about 4 years, I still pretended to be a CPA as a SEAL, and I would do the tax returns for all my SEAL teammates, and I felt really guilty for taking their money, so I took a case of beer for every tax return I did until my garage was filled with beer, and I figured I just couldn't drink it all, so I stopped doing that.
Good choice. And I think you've done very well. In fact, you've gone on to write a few books, one of them a fantastic book called The Unbeatable Mind. And so I need to answer the question that a lot of my listeners ask, which is, Doug, it's cool that this guy was a CPA, but why did you bring him on this show? And I think, I have this theory that the reason that people do badly in investing is not because the markets are rough, which it's true they're rough, but it's because of the way they deal with adversity. And I know that a Navy SEAL commander like yourself, you went through a lot of rough seas, but you won. So what can people learn from a book like The Unbeatable Mind or from the teachings that you have to make them better investors?
Right, you're absolutely right, Douglas. I mean, essentially, it all comes down to mindset, and how mindset is basically mental management. How do you manage your thoughts and your emotions? Because emotion essentially is a felt thought, and especially when the market tanks or it's just super volatile, we tend to get really emotional, or our minds start to think that we're going to lose all our money, and we just can't. You can't radar lock on the right thought, which is going to lead you to mission success, victory. So what I teach in Unbeatable Mind is a process for developing control over your inner space, right? And I teach, 4 real critical skills. One is breath control, taking control of your breathing apparatus and then using that as a mechanism for calming and stilling your mind, which leads to the second skill, which is really beginning to cultivate very powerful internal dialogue and internal feeling states. So that's mental and emotional control. And then turning that control into a very positive, courageous, competent, and confident, outlook on life, where you are, willing to be patient. You understand that, there is suffering involved in anything good that comes out of life. That understand you have to work as a teammate, and also you have to set aside your own needs and your own ego to accomplish tasks, and to learn how to be trustworthy and to trust, those types of things. So those are all begin with a thought and a belief system, and then they translate into a feeling state, and then that shows up as a character, right?
Well, let's just drill down into one of those, which is developing patience. Because, when I speak to clients in my day job as a financial advisor, I'll often talk to them about being a long-term investor. So they say, great, Doug, I'm all for it. And then a month later, the market's down and they call in a panic. And I say, what about all that long-term stuff? How do you get someone to develop the trait of patience?
Well, again, it comes back to getting control of your rational mind, which is going to be, which typically is bouncing all over the place. And, they call that the monkey mind in the Eastern traditions of meditative practice. And so what we've come to learn through my SEAL training and through my own training, teaching SEAL and special operators how to succeed, as well as executives how to succeed, is that the rational mind, that thinking part of your mind, is just one way that your mind thinks, and that you can tap into these other very powerful mental processes, such as visualization, which is your visual mind, your perceiving mind, which is the ability to really tap into your intuitive and instinctual and insightful intelligence, as well as you're really improving your memory and how you save and access memory. Right? And so once you start to work with this inner space, this mental space, and you can then uncover belief systems and things that aren't serving you right properly. And one of those belief systems is that the day-to-day gyrations of the market are going to, paying attention to those is a good thing, right? Because that's more of an addiction. It's not a good thing, actually. You should
Right.
shut it up. I don't watch TV at all, Douglas. And, if you told me the market was tanking today, I wouldn't know until I went and scanned my news sources. And frankly, it really doesn't impact me because I've got other things that are really important to focus on, and I get my news when I need it. And if it's a crisis, I learn about it from from sources that are, basically, it's their imperative to let me know it's a crisis. So, when I we have this concept called front sight focus. If you're a sniper, you've got to keep your eyes on the long target, right? The long target. But then, when you're ready to pull the trigger, you collapse it to the front sight of the weapon, right? And you just, you go after that target. So if your long target is to develop a portfolio of equities and bonds and other instruments, and maintaining a long-term investment strategy where you're constantly putting money in and not taking it out at the slightest sign of trouble, then you keep that focus on that long-term target, and then you execute your short-term strategies as they come along, as the opportunities come along, and you assess them very methodically and thoughtfully using good mental models. And that's where the folks need to rely on you to provide those mental models of investing and the strategies that are going to push through the gyrations and the natural dynamics of the markets going up and down based upon world events and news cycles and that type of thing.
I love that. I love that comparison between being an investor and a sniper, which is having the ability to look way down what your target is, because you always have to keep an eye on the target, but at a certain point, you have to pull the trigger. Mark, we are just about out of time. We've learned a lot, and it's been great. But tell us in the last few seconds, how can people follow you and follow your work?
Well, thanks, Doug. I have a couple books out there. We've talked about Unbeatable Mind. That's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, mostly online stores, because that's my self-published book. I'm proud of that. And then The Way of the SEAL, that's a national bestseller. That's available at Barnes & Noble as well as online. That's more of my leadership kind of manifesto that teaches you how to really execute in the world powerfully using the principles that I use to teach my warriors, athletes, and leaders who come and train with me in person. And information on that program is called SEALFit, can be found on the website, SEALFit.com, all one word, SEALFIT.com. And information on my executive coaching program can be found at unbeatablemind.com.
Okay, and we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show. And I also just want to mention that soon after, in just a few weeks, I think, your upcoming release of your book about Kokoro Yoga is coming out. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. The yoga program I've been teaching SEALs and special operators here in the United States has had a great effect on their ability to really maintain a calm and focused mind in combat, and as well as more durability. We call it Kokoro. Kokoro is a Japanese word that means to merge your heart and your mind in action. So it's a powerful program, and my book is coming out, I think, around April 7th for that.
All right, we will put links to all of that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Mark Devine, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
The honor is mine. Thank you very much, Douglas.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.